Hey traders, good evening. It's me, Ronnie, and I just want to give you an update on some stocks that we talked about yesterday, where they are, and also a new stock that I'd like to share with you, an idea that I found over the weekend, and I've been looking into a little bit. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm not going to go into a market overview today because we did it yesterday, but let's go back to the healthcare industry that I was speaking about yesterday, and in specific Humana. So Humana, I had told you all that I had bought into the stock a couple of days back, as it was crossing into this gap here. So right on this day, which is the 11th, just as it was pushing into the gap, confirming that push into the gap. I did not sell it the next day when it almost filled the gap, but I held it. And as you can see, yesterday it actually had an interesting move. United Health, which is also an insurance group, they actually had some pretty bad news. Actually, it wasn't bad news. The earnings were fine, but they narrowed their guidance. But the stock reacted quite hard, as you can see here, to the downside. Now it has since made up a good bit of the fall that it had, and it's working its way back up into this gap right here that it's going to be filling. But on that news, almost all of the other major health insurance companies went down in sympathy, and you can kind of see this really well on the hourly chart. Actually, it's very clear. So this is kind of what I woke up to on Wednesday, and you can see it was already down, and it went down further in the overnight with that news from UNH. It actually went below my stop loss in the overnight session, but by the time the next day the market opened, it started climbing up again. So I actually have a rule that if something gaps down, or if it's, just a news driven event, I usually give it about 30 minutes in the morning to see if it continues or if it can maintain that first 15-minute bar low if it's a gap down. So it held up pretty well. And so I actually held on to my Humana position, and I'm still in it. This is an hourly chart. So let me go back to the daily. So I'm still in that with my stop loss actually pulled up a little bit to the bottom of this day's low. So instead of it being down at the bottom of the day that I bought it, it is now pulled up to the bottom of the day that it had that strong down move and bounced hard in the overnight. So that's 251.24 now is my stop. Again, my target is the gap fill. As time is passing, if it's not going to make it, it may, if it doesn't go up quickly enough, it may be that this 20 moving average kind of, as it's coming down, it may hit the 20 moving average and turn over. So I'll have to keep an eye out on the 20. As you can see, it's kind of done some other moves on that 20. So I'm keeping a close eye on this. If it comes up in the next few days to that gap fill, I don't think it'll be an issue. But if it takes a little bit longer, it may have more of an impact. But at present, I am still holding Humana with the anticipation of a gap fill, and with my stop down below yesterday's low. So that's Humana. I also talked about Weight Watchers with you all, and just kind of taking a look and keeping an eye on Weight Watchers. So I will share with you where it is now after our discussion the other day. So we've got, still, some news-driven pop in Weight Watchers with some consolidation now. So I think the last time I did a video on this, I indicated that it needs to stay above the low of this red bar right here, which is the first gap up after the strong volume news day. So actually, I believe this was the news day, the big green bar, but this was kind of like, people have the news before the news. So once it gapped up on the news, and has since kind of on low volume come down to consolidate, I'm using this $1.28 as my line in the sand kind of. So if it can make it, and even you could actually use the top of this gap. So you could go as low as 119 and you should be okay. So right now, I'm just waiting and watching. And if it turns and starts to go in the other direction, I will probably take a position here in Weight Watchers. So outside of Weight Watchers and Humana, I think we spoke a little bit about China, and I want to give you an update because I think there's some interesting things happening now. So here's the FXI, which is the China, one of the China ETFs, which is, if you hang on one second, this is the daily on the left again, and the weekly on the right. And FXI is actually a large cap China stock. There are small cap China stock ETFs that you can also look at. So this is an ETF with the large cap stocks in China. So kind of like the Dow of China a little bit. So what I was speaking about here is this meteoric rise over the past few weeks rather, in China. And, a lot of these gap ups have happened over time, over the past couple of weeks, due to the news from their central bank, their government really indicated that they're going to be providing liquidity into the market. And so it'll be interesting to see what tomorrow looks like, because overnight, I think there was already some news that the housing market had some issues and prices have declined 4% or something of that nature. So at present, it looks like it is turning around from this backing up off of this high of this move here. So what my thoughts were was that we wait for it to consolidate a little bit and move back up, and then take a position in some of these Chinese stocks, not FXI, but I was looking at BABA, JD.com, and BILI. So here's BABA. It's still kind of not looking so great. It's still negative. Still not really turned around, but it's consolidating. We've got JD, which looks a little better, but still consolidating. Starting a consolidation potentially. If you look at the weekly, it's coming down 2 weeks in a row on lower volume than the 2 weeks prior, which were the highest volume of the month or even 2-3 months. So then we're going to go to BILI, which is I think the one that I spoke about last time. And to me, this is the most not the most compelling, but it has maybe a quicker or a more risk reward, setup than some of the other ones. Other ones, as you can see, were a little bit higher up, right? So JD.com, it actually didn't go down that much in the consolidation. It stayed quite high because it's a strong stock. So it's gone up. It's only come down maybe like 25, 30% from the high. Same with BABA. It's a little bit more, but not that much. So I would anticipate it could come down a little bit more still. But BILI, not that it can't come down, but I'm going to just keep an eye out here for it to hold today's low. So looking for it to hold today's low. This was actually, it's not an exact drawing, so let me remove that. But if it can hold this low of today, which is 20.05, you could also, once again, you could utilize this gap, the start of this gap, as your kind of line in the sand, and look for a bounce off of that. That is also fine. I am going to use this right now, and then if it continues to go down, I'll reevaluate. But looking at the weekly, it has a good chart pattern in the sense that it's got this long base. This is why I like this stock. It has this base that's formed over the last year. With that being the top, you can see it kind of peaked up and failed. We're looking for it to retest, and we don't want it to go below this trend line, really. Let's show you the trend line that I'm looking at. If you think about it this way, just you can utilize this trend line here. Sometimes I don't go to the bottom of big wicks. I try to see what the more reasonable trend line could be, and where does it hit the most, where does it hit multiple bars. So this is the trend line I'm using just out of the way I trade. So you obviously can have any way of doing it as long as you stay consistent with the way that you utilize your charting patterns and your methodology. So here, again, technically it could come all the way down to this trend line and then still bounce. So I will be continuing to keep an eye on it. If it turns around and moves strongly up from here, I'm going to look to get into it after it crosses back above the 20 moving average. Or we'll wait for the 20 moving average to kind of roll over a little bit as this consolidates, and then it'll be an even better price to get in with an easier entry. So that's BILI. Still watching and waiting, but again, I still think that China has a good opportunity to consolidate and turn around. And then finally, Tesla, we talked about. Still really nothing major going on, just consolidating after a gap down. Still watching and waiting for this bounce here off of this trend line. So it looks good for this week. We'll see how it goes to the end of the week. And if it does come up above this 224.58 level, that's when I'll take an entry, and with the first target being the gap fill. But in reality, I'm looking for it to continue upward to this resistance here. If you look at the weekly chart, you can see a resistance line I've drawn in, and I'm looking for it to break that actually. So I'll probably get in a smaller position here, potentially take some off here. If it manages to continue, I will continue adding smaller positions. And then at this breakout, I'll probably load up a little bit more. And, I just want to make sure it has the strength and the momentum to make that move. This is also 50% Fibonacci retracement. So it may not. So I like to kind of keep my position sizing smaller initially on a preliminary trade, especially going into a resistance like this. So once it breaks, I like to get confirmation and maybe enter in again. Yes, it's not the best price, but it's the more reliable setup, breaking out of a range like that. Okay, so those are all the stocks that we talked about. So I'll give you my one stock trade idea for this week. So I've been looking at some stocks that are coming up right from a low, that have been maybe either basing or had some news, and maybe went down and are now kind of consolidating up, similar to BILI actually. And so one of those stocks is a technology and software stock called NICE. And as you can see by its chart, the weekly chart on the right, you have this downtrend that it's in, like a longer term downtrend. And on the bottom here, you can see that there is a higher low right here that occurred in July. And so, it continues to make higher lows off of that. If you look back on the daily, you can see the higher lows. And so really this low of 162.53 actually, this last low is kind of the line in the sand again, right? So it's actually breaking out from the prior high here in this area from the past several weeks. And today was actually probably a good day to start a position in this stock, as it's confirming and closing above this like kind of minor breakout. Looking at it on the weekly, some of the targets that I have, first target here being about 186.99, really 186.72 it looks like is the high here, not 186.99. So it's the high of this bar here. So you can see that if you hover over the bar and look up at the top there. So it'll tell you what the high is, 186.72. So that's what I'm going to look at for the first target. And then, if it maintains, if it breaks this barrier here, I'll look for it to kind of make its way up to this trend line again. As you can see, it's done before a couple of times in the past. So this, if you look at the monthly, I'll show you that so you can see kind of further back in the chart. So this is the all-time high on this, 319.88, and it's come down, and then it's made its way back up, and it's come back down, but it's not lower. It's not a lower low, it's a higher low. So we're looking for some consolidation here, and then maybe an uptrend back to this trend line. And then, it could potentially break out, but I mean, it is in the technology sector, which, is doing pretty well. So we shall see. I mean, with this big of a down move, I don't anticipate just a automatic up move, a retracement back up. So we will keep an eye on the moving averages as our targets going up. So first target, this breakout, which is also the 50-week moving average. And then second target will be halfway up. So I'll show you, I'll put a Fibonacci on here. Retracement from the top down to the bottom, the lowest low of this cycle. And you can see that's that 50% retracement's around 211.45. So that's kind of the second target to think about. I don't know, it may retrace, pull back a little bit from the 50, which is fine. And then we'll look for another entry to go back up if it gives us that opportunity. Right now, I'm worried about the short-term outlook here, which is potentially getting into the stock tomorrow with an entry over today's high, which is 178.57. So as soon as it crosses 178.57, I'll put in a buy order, a buy limit, and potentially take a small position initially as it comes up to this first resistance line, and then as it breaks, maybe add slightly to that position if it does that on high volume. Right now, you can see the relative strength is increasing as it's coming up this trend line here. It's also gone green on the MACD histogram. So this is all positive momentum in the right direction. So we'll keep you posted on NICE. This is a new position that I'm looking to get into tomorrow. And we'll keep you updated on that, as well as all of the other sectors and indexes in the next video. I wanted to keep this one short and sweet. So enjoy your evening and happy trading.